Find the simple thing that helps you remember that you are worthy, you are worth it, and that the world needs you. And then just build from there, one step at a time.
This is A Joyful Rebellion, the podcast that explores that moment you realize the life and success you worked so hard to create didn't come with all the fulfillment you thought it would. I'm your host, James Walters, and I want you to be the author of your own story. Each week, I connect with people who inspire bold answers to the question, what do I do now to create a life I love? If you're ready to start answering that question for yourself, you're in the right place. So let's start a joyful rebellion. What if the voice that saved your life was your own? David Allen Brown is a writer, speaker, and creator of the Convergence, a personal transformation program rooted in one deceptively simple truth, and that is your inner dialogue shapes your outer life. After a slow erosion of self through parenthood, partnership, and putting everyone else first, David found himself driving aimlessly in the middle of one night, not sure if he wanted to come home. In this episode, we talk about emotional reawakening, reclaiming personal power, and the long road back to authenticity. David shares how years of writing fiction helped him develop characters, except the one that mattered most, himself. We explore identity shifts, depression that hides in plain sight, and how he learned to trust the voice inside that finally whispered, "I've got you." If you've been drifting through your own story, unsure who's holding the pen, this conversation is your invitation to pick it back up. David Allen Brown, thank you so much for being here on this Joyful Rebellion today.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's going to be a fun conversation. And when I saw your info, it says right up front, you're an author. You've written several books. You've written plays. And that I really connect with that creative experience, that process that you have to go through. And digging in a little deeper, the thing I thought was cool is you talk about a lot of self-talk and how that relates to the real world. And I know when you're going through the writing process, you have to work on your characters and you have to develop your characters. You have to find out, okay, what motivates them? What is their inner dialogue? And when you kind of cross over from that creative world into real world and talking about our own, the things we tell ourselves, the lies we tell ourselves, the things we may not tell ourselves that would be pretty darn helpful if we did. So I would love to talk about self-talk, inner dialogue, and kind of that crossover between the real world and the world we make up, because part of this on A Joyful Rebellion, I talk about being the author of your own story. Mm-hmm. And sometimes people will ask me, well, what the heck does that mean? And I was like, you know what? Every movie you've ever seen, every book you've ever read, it started with a script. It started with someone decided, okay, I'm going to create this thing. I'm going to create this world. And that world can become a reality for someone if it's your real life, if you choose that.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what I mean when I say be the author of your own story, because so many times we hand the pen to someone else and say, okay, just tell me where to be, what to do. I'll show up. I'll do that thing.
You bet.
And then they call it a life.
Right. So, or they start to resent the person holding the pen. Yeah. That's like, oh, this is all happening to me.
That's really tough when you give away your power, because that's something you also talk a lot about is your own agency, or people getting and grabbing onto the power that they didn't maybe realize they had. So I want to start when you were going about your life, just happily going about your life. Everything was great till it wasn't, because that's how these stories begin, right? That's how just about every hero's journey, if it's that kind of a story, it begins. Everything's hunky-dory, and then boom, some challenge, and then all the work to get through it. So what's that arc look like for your beginning in this work?
This is such a fun way to approach it from that sort of creative standpoint. This is sort of what's your story, and we can get into writing process and see how this interweaves. So I love this premise and start, and I appreciate the question. So what's your arc? Because that really is it. And you got to do a little character building first. I was raised Midwestern, upper middle class, privileged white kid in a very safe community, in a blended family with 4 brothers and sisters, and a physician stepfather who was kind and loving. There wasn't a ton of strife in my childhood. And in fact, being the youngest, I was coddled a little and told that I was by lots of influences and that I was okay. When they weren't punching me and tickling me, then they were telling me that I'll be okay and it'll be fine. So that gave me both sides of the coin. That's a little resilience, but also some confidence. And I entered into young adulthood pretty much feeling strong in who I was and what I was doing. I got a fine arts degree, but then quickly went back into the realm of personal empowerment, working with young people, leadership development for high school students, just really trying to show up for people in a lot of different ways, and was thrilled to be doing that. And then that began to weave into a spiritual approach to that. Let's just say straight out, not religious, but just bringing in a sense of the wonder and the higher power and the energy that surrounds us all. Everyone listening can define that for themselves as I use terms like that as we go through this. But what that provided was a broader audience of people who wanted to hear the message of what power do I have? How do I claim it? How do I answer the call was a phrase that I used a great deal. How do I know what's mine to do? And then what's the arc? So that's the thing. It was kind of a long, slow series of choices, none of which seemed bad at the time, many of which I'm still very proud of. Getting married, choosing to be a stay-at-home dad, raising 2 kids, being a support to my successful and income-earning spouse. And she and I just, over time, as long-time relationships do, there were hiccups. There were things that I was ignoring. There were things that were easier to shove away. There were ways to concede and sort of give away my power. And really, one of the things that I hope your listeners will recognize is many of them in very standard ways that in our society, we can say, actually, I was a really good person for empowering my kids and letting them make choices instead of me always having to get what I want, or being in support of a partner rather than exploring my own thing, or being humble so that I didn't seem egotistical and boastful to the people around me, and always being willing to turn over the conversation and let other people talk, and just realizing that, all of these things I can put into, doesn't that make me a great friend? Doesn't that make me a great person? But the arc is a slow diminishing of who I am and what really drives me, what am I really called to do. And the turning point probably was the day that as my children grew up and became independent, that I realized I loved doing that. I was very, very good at it. I adore my family and my children. And guess what? That isn't my fundamental calling in life. That wasn't what I was put on this planet to do. And it's not regretting doing it. It's becoming aware of what might there be that's bigger.
Wow. I just had a conversation just a few minutes ago with someone. That conversation, very different topic. It was about grit. It was about tenacity. It was about gratitude. And a lot of the conversations, the concept of identity weaves itself in there. And what you were describing was a series of identity shifts. And one of the big ones that we talked about was, and sometimes it's a really positive one. It's not always trauma that shifts our identity, but sometimes our kids do go off and start to live their life. And you're like, oh, okay, I don't have to walk them to anywhere anymore. They do that. Or I don't have to drop them off anywhere because they drive themselves now. So now you go from one, and it's a slight shift, but they build on each other, don't they?
Yeah.
And for you, that building started to happen. And there was a period there that you realized you wanted to do a lot more work on yourself with respect to your identity, your self-talk. What tipped the scale there?
I had been in therapy from time to time, but bad therapy, and therapy that I wasn't participating well in. So it's not always on the practitioner. Some of it's, what am I hiding? What you were saying before, what's the stories we're telling ourselves?
Yeah.
What are the things we're not telling ourselves? And so it was a bit maintaining, and I didn't recognize the depression because I was functional, because I was still doing so much and still accomplishing so much. So there were two, one of them's just a little thing, but like I was running to maintain some health. And there's a song, and I forget even who it's by, but it's like, I just want to be okay. And it's this kind of good running song and the whole thing. But the lyrics are, I just want to be okay. I just want to feel something today. And I found literally in the middle of my neighborhood, in the middle of a run, that struck me because depression for me wasn't sad all the time. It was numb. And I realized that I wasn't experiencing life in a full way because that lyric reminded me I haven't felt anything in a long time. I haven't cried. I haven't laughed. I haven't enjoyed. I haven't felt peace. I haven't felt anything. So that was an interesting trigger. And that came along just before COVID. And then COVID was a major trigger because my family was back in the house. Some had gone to college. My son was in high school at the time. I'm like, yay, my role is reborn. I get to be the dad again. Let me take care of everybody. And they very lovingly and appropriately said, no, that's not your role. And so that was a blow to me that I didn't necessarily even know I was experiencing at the time. But it took me down a couple more notches of, well, to use your phrase, my identity. So what is it that I'm here for? Who is it that I'm making a difference for, and why am I here? That thought pattern became very destructive. And if I can't find that answer for myself, the why should I be here, then I began to believe, well, maybe I don't need to be here. And so there were a few incidences in which I started to have ideation of such a thing. And one of the scariest ones was to flee the house and get out. And maybe after some sort of interaction with my son, I got in the car and just started driving around nearly the middle of the night, maybe to 1 a.m. or later. But during COVID, everything was quiet at 1 p.m. So it's pretty much me driving the circle around my city, places I'd never been before. And I remember having to consciously steer away from obstacles because it was entering my head. What if I just drove right into that right now? What if I just drove right off of this right now? What would happen? What might it be? How would I make sure that was effective? And honestly, it was my children primarily. And this memory that I had of some TV show that said that if you harm yourself that way, the accident investigators will somehow know that it was intentional and not an accident. And then the word would get out and my kids would be devastated. Whatever it was, I ended up home safe. But then I said, this is something I need to say out loud to someone who can actually help me. And I found a great therapist who I've had a long relationship with, and that's exactly what happened.
That's good. And that comes back to the root of what we talk about here so much is awareness. And that was pretty acute awareness. It sounds like some of the things stretched out over time, but after that, you were like, okay, this is...
The key moments are, I think, like that. And I think it's a good way to present it and to bring it before your audience, which is that what's easy to do is to dismiss them as just a moment instead of actually putting the weight on them of, oh no, this was a moment. Like, take it in. And I think if you combine those two stories, what you get is I hadn't been feeling anything for a long time, and suddenly I had a big spike of fear. And so, because those thoughts scared me. And so that's how it becomes a moment when something within, and it doesn't always have to be difficult. Sometimes it's joyous. Sometimes it's amazing. But when those things happen, part of the process is not dismissing them. Awareness, like you said, but awareness with intention. Okay, I'm aware that happened. Now what do I need to do? I need to perpetuate this amazing thing that happened, this joyous feeling I had when I was in service or doing this activity or etc. Or I need to respond to this fear or this hurt or this brokenness. So yeah, the awareness is there, and then the bravery of stepping forward, because of course that was 2020. So easily 3 years beyond that before I really started to take major action to change my life, and still another, 2025, another 2 before I've really felt like I'm stepping into my authentic self.
Yeah. And the thing that I keep going back to as we're talking about this is the fact that you are a writer, you write novels, and part of that process is kind of what I might call the alchemy of just blending story with emotions. You have to pull the reader in. You have to pull the reader in with the character's flaws, their hopes and dreams, things that aren't going well for them, because people can relate to people that are going through life, that are going through stuff, but that doesn't give you any special insight into your own when those things come up. And even though you can build this world, build a character, and bring people in and envelop all of the emotions and things with the story,
Yeah.
when it's happening in your own life, you're like, what the hell's going on? Like, why does
Right.
this suck?
But that's why we get back to, I mean, let's talk about process a little bit. I mean, everybody does it a little different. I do teach workshops on writing, and I do adore the process because I want to take this thread that you're going with too. Story is an outlining process that happens in a very logical place in my brain as a writer. It has to make sense. It has to have one after the other. It's a series of events. Okay, that's gonna happen. I do plays too, and one of my favorite playwrights is Edward Albee, who wrote Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, among many others. And I have read works by him. He said the most amazing thing about playwriting is you take two characters that you've fully developed and you put them in the room and you see what happens. You put a sparking event in there. And so that's getting to process. We fully flesh our characters. Full histories, full principal incidents, defining moments, how they speak, where they're from, all the demographic questions, of course, so that when this stuff happens that I've conceived in a whole different part of my brain, I'm not thinking, what do I want this character to say? I am listening to how that character responds. Whether it's the simplest thing in my young adult novel, the two protagonists end up in an upside down canoe looking at each other. And of course they're in love and they kiss each other. It's a very cute moment and the whole thing. And the boy is a little sheepish and says sorry. And the girl is a little bold and says, oh, don't be stupid. And pulls him to her, the whole thing. Well, you have to know who those people are before you put them under an overturned canoe so that that moment can happen. How would she respond and why? Based on what? Her history and her dating profile and who she is at school and her grades and her confidence. And why is he shy and a little demure? Where did he come from? What's his background? What's his thought? So then that moment doesn't come, gee, I want to create a situation where she can show her that she's strong and he can show, no, create situations that, so how does all this relay? You know where we're going with this.
Yeah.
When we know who we are, when we've done the full flesh of our personalities, where did we come from? What did we expect? How do we interact? And accept those people, meaning ourselves, lovingly and wholly. And so if we make a mistake or say something stupid that we perceive as stupid or want to judge ourselves or get judged, we can have a firm foundation of, you know what? That's who I am. And I'm good. And I may need to atone or apologize or fix or celebrate or whatever, but let's just start with full character identity. Who are you? And are you being honest about that? And are you exhibiting that when all of this story comes at you, some of which you don't have any control over?
Yeah, because there's a part of the story, and we're talking about both fiction and real life here.
Of course.
But there's part of everyone's story that happens to them. And then there's that part where they either decide or not, because that's the beauty of it. You get to decide so much more than you think.
Right.
And when you do decide, or when a character that you're reading about or watching decides, okay, I'm going to take this on, and they start moving, it's like people say, they start moving the plot forward. And that's when things really get interesting. And when that happens in your own life, man, do things get interesting. I mean, for good and for bad, because sometimes you're moving that plot forward and it's not going to a great place.
Exactly.
Like, let's steer this boat to the left a little bit. What was that like for you when, after you took that drive, and this was years ago, so after you got kind of on a track, and I'm guessing that relationship with the person that you found was more positive than you had before, what were things that happened differently after that for you?
Talk about deciding where you want to take the dialogue. So,
yeah.
I mean, a lot of things happen. And one of the first things that I recognized and was helped to recognize, I mean, this all happened in therapy and on my own too, but we're alluding to inner dialogue and the ability to be aware. And a lot of that comes from being able to trust yourself, that you've done the work, that you know when you're telling yourself the truth and when you're deluding yourself. And that takes time. And when that inner dialogue, when that inner understanding has been missing, then restarting it can be really rough because I found that I was very, very hard on myself, that I was a doubter, that I no longer had the confidence I had as a young person, that it had been sapped away from me over years, or I had given it away. And so the first things that happened was, through really some pretty great techniques that I wouldn't have thought of, was just reclaiming my worth and therefore being able to believe again in what was coming from inside, even when those things were, let's say, spicy. I mean, let's just talk about that, because one of the aspects of the human experience is the emotional side, which I had been completely devoid of. Well, when you re-energize that side of you, it can be pretty shocking. Like, it can be pretty startling.
For everyone, right?
For everyone, right?
Yeah, for everyone.
I mean, I had an occasion where I was working with an attorney. That's enough of a premise. And it was maybe one of the most infuriating things that is there. I told my kids, you've never seen me that angry. Maybe the most angry I've ever been in my life based on the behavior of another person. And I'm in it. There's nothing I can do about the situation in that moment. And I'm literally reaching out to advisors and my brother. I'm like, what do you do? Like, what do you do when you're this angry? And so relearning how to feel, how to trust how you feel, how to release judgment from how you feel. One of the simplest and kindest things someone said to me in the midst of that incident was, I believe anger is the appropriate reaction here. Which is, hold on to that and give it to a friend when you need to, and replace the word anger with whatever. The validation of someone very simply saying, I believe anger is the right response here, was like, oh, so removing judgment from feeling and just allowing it to be, and then realizing that it's also leading me somewhere. You're going to hear this theme before. Okay, so here's an incident. Now, what's the intention that comes from that? And so that's a starting place when stuff happens to us. So here's this emotional side. I call it the instinctual side of us. This is the core of us, evolution, who we've become, how we function, the chemical side of all of the things that we are. And so, yeah, you have to deal with that in such a way, but emotions are such a gift because the whole spectrum of them are calling us to respond, calling us to compassion or to action, or, the gift of anger is motivation. And I talk about that in my program. There's gifts of all of the feelings that we would, again, like before, I'm having a moment. Oh, shoot. Okay, at least I don't feel sad anymore. I'm back to neutral. No, I'm having a moment. What is this sadness calling me to? What is this joy calling me to? And that's where you start writing your own story, because then comes in another side of us, which is the compelled action sort of intellect, but it's mostly action. Well, what am I going to do, therefore?
Yeah.
And what am I being called to do? And how can that action help soothe, help respond to how I'm feeling? And internally, we can provide that for ourselves by just entering into a dialogue between those first two out of three of the aspects of our human nature. And so that's how I started to begin to integrate that sort of storytelling. But for me, you can probably tell I'm a word person. Like, for me, it's a dialogue, entering into that dialogue of, okay, what's this meant to be? As opposed to thinking that it's just something to get through.
You have to just deal with it. And instead of creating something with it or from it, or at least learning. And it's funny because the whole concept of inner dialogue, I mean, that comes from something I love to talk about here on the podcast, and that's programming. And the reason it's called a joyful rebellion is because for a lot of people, there are maybe 2 or 3 times in their life when they go through what I would describe as a joyful rebellion. And it is when you are at a point where you have to make a choice. Yeah. You have to leave behind the person you were, or you want to. Sometimes you have to, sometimes you want to.
Right.
And I find that it's quite often later in life for people when they get to that point where there's a version of themselves they want to either develop a little bit more, or they want to launch into. So it's not like they're running away from something. It's like they're running toward something else. But to be able to do that, you have to shed off some of that programming. And that's where the rebellion comes in, because those are the things, whatever third grade teacher told you that you have to get a college degree and go to work every day, and that's going to make you successful, and that success is going to make you happy. maybe you bought that, and maybe they had the best intentions ever. And so maybe that's what some of your internal dialogue is based around. But let's talk a little bit more about when it was for you that you were like, okay, this internal dialogue thing, that's a thing. I've been talking to other people.
Yeah.
This is a thread that runs through it. And now you've got a program that you facilitate. It's called Convergence. And I want you to talk a little bit about that. And when did you realize it wasn't just you who was having this experience in life and kind of dealing with their inner dialogue, and maybe that holding them back from the story they wanted to create?
Yeah, I think that big picture, just very quickly, like this is something I recognized when I was a child or when I was younger, especially in adolescence. I have a very distinct memory of a friend, that some sort of teenage drama going on. And I don't mean to diminish teenage drama. I mean, it's real. And me going for a fast walk and being like, well, this, and just suddenly realize, like, I'm talking about both sides of this. It's not just me venting, like there's a something. And so I started to just grasp onto that I had that capacity. I really didn't put names to it. And then you talk about programming, of course, then I got the whole, well, only crazy people talk to themselves type of thing. It's like, oh, okay, so maybe that's not okay. And then I went to school and I'm starting to learn about Freud and the id and the ego and the superego and Jungian philosophy and all the different ways, different components of our personalities. And I'm thinking, oh, wait, I think this is a something. Then in some of the early teaching that I was doing for adults, I did a lot of the sort of self-talk conversation, and it was really just very much an awareness that from within were the answers. How do you cultivate that? How do you listen? How do you hear? Some of that is there's lots of techniques, whether it's meditation or you're a journaler or you're me, I do so much verbally, whether you write stories, anything that helps you just get to that place of peace and calm and like I was saying before, trust. Then there's that big gap of the loss of trust. And then the return to, I'm not using that phrase midlife crisis, it's the midlife rebellion, the way to talk about it on this podcast. I was like, okay, it's those key moments when that's exactly what you were describing. And what I was talking about just now, those types of things, experiencing emotion again. And honestly, probably the turning point there was being grateful. It really was a sense of I had missed out so long on the experience of being alive, which happens to us physiologically and emotionally, that rather than go to a judgment about how I was feeling, I went to gratitude about how I was feeling. And I've talked to other people about this. One of the great moments was I was talking just over lunch with a friend, and they were talking about something that was happening to their partner at work and how it was making them really angry, and there was nothing they could do. Of course, it's their partner's problem and it's their boss at work and all, completely separated. And they were just frustrated for their partner and the thing. And I said, maybe you could just celebrate. Like, it's amazing how much you care for your partner that it brings up these feelings for you. Yeah. Like, isn't it remarkable how much empathy you have for their situation, that you want to take action and that you're getting frustrated? And that sort of shift into gratitude for how we were feeling was a big part of it for me. And then recognizing, of course, because I don't mean to bury the lead, but I was going through divorce at this time. So I was back to being independent. I'm restructuring a whole ton of my life. So there was not an option to not do something about it. So in comes this other voice that I was talking about. Then in the midst of all of this is, we don't want to leave this behind, but it did take me a while. These two voices are working hard to survive. This is how we get through life. This is where many people remain. I got things I have to do today, and this is how I feel about them today. And things happen to me today, and this is how I'm responding to them today. And I get that we're there. And in the midst of an even lower point, I was really struggling, really was a side of me, the very frustrated intellectual side of me, just pummeling the emotional side of me, just judgment, frustration, anger. Why are you this way? Why are you stuck this way? Why can't you do something different, etc.? And then all of a sudden, having been missing for a while, was this lovely, calm third voice that just said, hello, like just kind of like from the corner, just sort of like, wow. And I remember going very still. The anger stopped and listening for it again. And the voice sort of said, hello. And I was like, okay. And then it said, I've got you. And for me, that's a very specific phrase. And I'll tell you the story of why. When my son was small, before we knew he needed glasses, and he probably needed them from the day he was born. In a toddler, he would be in a social situation. We would like go to a family gathering or whatever. And all of a sudden we would look over and he would just be stuck. That's what we called it laughingly. Like he would just be frozen in the middle of the room.
Wow.
Just like that. And we would nudge each other, say, oh, look, he's stuck. And I would go over and scoop him up and put him close to me and whisper in his ear, I got you. And I could feel him know everything was okay. And we later realized this is happening because he would lose cognitive ability. And so, he really couldn't see very well. So here comes this voice from my, I'm going to say superconsciousness, that says exactly what I need to hear in that moment, which is, I got you. Everything's okay. It's going to be okay. And I become reintroduced to the understanding that there is something greater than me that can help guide the active doing part of me and always help comfort the emotional, instinctual side of me. And that when those voices work together, that's why it's called convergence. When they converge and agree on action, intention, let's keep the theme going, the story we want to write, then the manifestation becomes very, very powerful. So I started reclaiming the things that I had known when I was younger, incorporating daily, virtually, how this could work in my life, how I was integrating, how I wanted to see it happen, what I needed to know about myself. What sort of self-discovery do I need to do? What sort of rediscovery do I need to do? What sort of inspiration do I need? How do I need to be reminded that I am important, that I do have a purpose, that the universe is calling me? How do I take steps of action and then evaluate in this convergent conversation what's happening and how I feel about it and what I want to do next? And that became the program that I developed and am now teaching and sharing. I think it's extraordinarily powerful, both in the daily living part, in just empowerment and finding the ability to go through the rebellion, and also in the manifestation and experience futuring part of, okay, so what do we want to see as a result of this rebellion? And it's been a heck of a ride.
Yeah. Wow. I want to talk a lot about the Convergence program in a second and feedback you've gotten and the types of people it works really well for. But on a side note, I'm just curious, as you've been talking, you've written a lot and you're trained as a writer, right? That's what you went to school for. That's what you've been doing for your professional career. And I'm curious for people listening who, so many people I talk to, they're the kind of person like me who is like, I'd love to write a book. That would be cool. So as a person who knows the process, intimately familiar with that character development, all the little pieces that we talked about, did that make it easier for you to apply those techniques to your own life? Because like you said, if you're going to be able to wrestle with the inner dialogue, you have to know the character, all of the things about them. Or do you feel like that made it a little more complicated because you already knew too much?
Yeah. I mean, in the character development part, I've done a not writing workshop. I've done a personal discovery workshop where I teach character development. I've had people do it in a fictional sense, like they've created a fictional character, but I've had also invited people to do it with someone that they have known in their life and to fill out like their understanding of that person. And then occasionally, if they really want to then enter into conversation now that they have that full understanding of who that is. And some people have gone to people that they've lost and asked questions and then really been able to more trust the answers. And it can be very powerful. So I guess in the discovery of myself, that character stuff did help.
Okay.
And that you added that caveat about, did it make it harder? Yes, because I fall into two rather predatory patterns of behavior myself. One is overthinking. And so, when it's fiction, one of the biggest things you choose when you're a writer is, what do you want to include? And even as a reader, some of you or some others may have experienced this, where you're realizing that, wow, that person just spent 4 pages describing the Eastern Seaboard while this character was on a bike ride. And now I know I can smell every smell and hear every seagull in the whole thing. Whereas other writers are like, let's just get to the point and let's just move on. And so that decision-making process as a writer has come into my realm as well, I've had to really understand how to edit and how to choose what's most important. So it's helped, but it was a block at the start. The other thing that I'm prone to is perfectionism. The reason writers have deadlines is so we'll stop messing around with our manuscript, because every time I read it, there's something I would change or do different or could do different. And then, I mean, someone could hand you back something and give you one line. Have you ever thought about this? And you're like, well, now I have to rewrite the whole thing.
Exactly.
And so, like, there are pitfalls to this way of thinking that I have to watch out for sure.
As we're talking, I just got so curious about that, because sometimes when you know what to look for under the hood of things and you go try to apply that into life, because by training I'm a photographer, so I see things very differently.
Yes.
Even when I walk in a room, I notice things a lot of people might not if they're just casually walking into the same room. And
yeah, and I'm sorry, I want you to finish that thought, but I don't want to let that go, because I love photography as a methodology for awareness and intention and attunement to surroundings and such. It's very, very powerful tool. So I hope you'll take time to help teach your audience about why and how becoming that aware in a moment makes a difference in their lives. So anyway, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's great. It is really a good trainer in looking for what could be the most important thing, because I'm always looking for what's the main thing I'm supposed to be noticing. In every space you walk into, whether it's intentional or not, there is something that the person who designed the space wants you to notice.
Yeah.
That could be a dorm room. It doesn't have to be a professional designer. It's just what is shown to you, but it's a language of its own, just like written language and what we do in writing. So that is something that I've been constantly trying to apply to things that I write. It's a tough translation because I'm visual, and so trying to apply that into writing has been a fun challenge for me. Sometimes it's really a frustrating challenge. But when you decided it was time to create Convergence, was there a conversation? Was there a person you talked to? Was there a series of things that happened where you said, you know what, I'm not the only one who's been through this?
There were. One of the most important things that I did, and also very, very helpful, I travel and speak. And I have relationships in particular with a couple of New Thought and progressive congregations. I tend to speak at Unity churches a lot and Unitarian churches, etc. So what I did after doing the Sunday message, which was unrelated, I would invite those people who knew me, because in Cincinnati, Ohio, for example, I've been going for 12 years or so. So I have a good relationship there. And I just posed it as something like, can I just be in conversation with you about this? It's not a workshop. It's not rounded. And I did 4 or 5. And they were about very specific parts of the program. I was intrigued because people would get frustrated. Well, tell me more. And I'm like, oh, good. I'm glad you want to know more. But it's like, I really need your feedback on how you recognize, let's say, the divine voice in your life. And we would have a really nice conversation about that. And I would cull the very real and practical sense of how people would do that, whether it was something very traditional like prayer or meditation, but then other really interesting ways that people would just recognize the divine. Or we would specifically talk about the emotions. How do you gauge your emotions? How do you feel? What are the gifts? How do you see? Do you have any stories to tell? And so that became just very foundational for me. And I, as a writer, no matter what, both in nonfiction and plays and the rest, the writing is the last part of what I do. I do a lot of framework, a lot of building out, as you've heard, in both character and story and outline. I mean, there's a lot to fill in when you get creative, and I need the intention and the purpose, and that's a lot of my writing workshops are about. Like, do you know why you're writing this? What's the central theme? And then there's a structure to it. So those conversations really allowed me that breadth of understanding to be able to sit down and say, okay, this is a thing, and I'm not the only one doing it, exactly what you said. So that was really helpful in the development of the Convergence program, for sure.
And with that program and with the folks you have talked to about it, is there a specific, I guess, avatar is a word that would come to mind, a specific person who would most benefit, or a person who has gone through the program where they seem to have a lot of characteristics in common?
my initial sort of academic approach to it, which is kind of how I work and how it kind of came across to me, and like I say, doing these conversations, was really great, and it provides a lot of information. But in answer to your question, what I'm discovering is that it's a lot of people who have really fundamental questions about kind of how life works. And there are folks who are to a point, and this is kind of the theme of what you and I are talking about, where they're ready to make a choice. And oftentimes it's about, they're usually stuck in one of the three areas. They're stuck in, like, I'm so emotional, or I'm so non-emotional. I can't get past my anger, or I feel frustrated all the time, or I'm tired of being so reactive all the time. And sometimes that gets really personal and painful. I don't feel loved. I feel very alone. I feel very isolated. They're stuck in a place of emotion, and they're really yearning for the input of these other aspects of our lives. You know, the simplest and one of the most profound truths of mental health is you can't talk your way out of depression. Action is required. So it's like, how can I bring action into that? Or how can I know I'm unconditionally loved by spirit and bring that voice into it to help bolster the knowledge that I am worthy because I am a child of this universe and that the universe is lonely without me, etc. Or I see them stuck in the active. My life is just so busy. All I can do, I'm just trying to get through every day. I do what you were saying. People tell me what to do. I show up. I've lost contact with the why or the how. I don't know, because I just have to make this bill or take care of this person or just keep plowing forward. And gee, I really wish I could have some time to just enjoy or feel at peace or be in the loving relationship. So you can hear this longing to bring emotion, to bring the experience of life in. Or similarly, sometimes that sense of what's it all about? Why? Am I answering my purpose? I need inspiration. I need something from a higher understanding of what's going on. I need to hear and be soothed by the knowledge that I can be enacting my purpose, my life's purpose, whilst I'm doing all of these things. And surprisingly, I have been, and I've met other people who've been stuck in the inspiration point, who have reached a point of piety that feels like, I mean, for me, of course, it was self-abusive. I was like, well, if I was more spiritual, if I was more connected, then I wouldn't be sad, that nothing would ever go wrong. All my dreams would be coming true, you know.
Yeah.
But I've also, there's another thing that happens, we call it spiritual shortcutting, which is all of this is up to God. I don't need to do anything. It's not my responsibility. It doesn't matter what happens because none of this is real. We're temporary in this plane, so who cares? Well, that's also, in my opinion, not what the human experience is about. When we are to be purely ethereal, we will know because we will not be here anymore. So whilst we're here, we integrate, we converge between these three aspects of our experience. So that's what I'm finding. After a short interview, I could typically hear just from the language where people feel stuck and or where they feel like they're neglecting. And so it's like, okay, great. Well, let's talk about techniques to bring what you're missing into and start. I use a Venn diagram. My logo is three circles that converge in the middle. And it's sort of, and in the logo, there's a little spot where they all overlap. Well, of course, the goal is to integrate, to make it one big circle. Or you've got one that's really huge and bolstered. You know, I can do that interview and in the end sort of draw a little, and I think you're looking a little like this. Let's see if we can get back to some balance. And so I think the characteristic, though, to make a sharp point on what you're asking, is it is people who are on the verge or in the midst of the rebellion, as you defined it. They're ready for a choice. They're ready to really be authentic and be actualized.
Yeah. And when they see something in the program that they say, aha, yes, that's the thing I want to work on.
Yeah.
What can they expect to have as next steps? What's kind of the experience like working through it?
In a very practical sense, it's a self-guided online program, but there's two very active things about it. One is there's a ton of like worksheets and active things, both journals and guided questionnaires. So when you're focusing on any one of the circles, we're providing tools to help you go deeper about your work style or how you gauge or feel about your emotions or how you connect to a higher power. So there's very active things to allow that to happen. The second thing that occurs is that everybody is invited to be part of a community And there's a little bit of extra teaching from me, but the live community is, hey, this is where I am right now. I tried this. I'm unclear about that. It's really just designed to help people get more in tune or provide some accountability, because the current version is not a short program. I mean, it's actually hours of work and can be ongoing. So those are very practical things. I think that what people are reflecting back to me that they're experiencing is that the goal is really threefold, which is, one is all the way back to our key theme today. What's your self-awareness level? And how are you cultivating that? Are you nurturing the voices? Can you trust them? Can you love them when they're spicy? Because it happens all the time. I mean, it's not like, oh, suddenly I'm all the better. It's like, no. Just this morning, I woke up and was like, look, you've got an open morning. You've got things to do. Like, the activated side of me is like, come on, let's go. And I'm like, okay. So that's one. It's the actualized self. The second is the authentic self, which is, okay, so you're not just acting, but are you doing that from a place of such knowledge that you're honoring who you are in as many ways as possible? Are you overcoming the damage that occurs when you deny being authentic? Because that's what the universe is looking for, is this authenticity. So actualize, which is the doing and the being involved in it. Authenticity, which is doing it in a way that's true to who you are. And then, with absolutely no cheesy or irony in my voice at all, are you incorporating love into all of these things as often and as consistently as you possibly can? That's the third voice coming in. And so in that authenticity, are you self-loving? Are you taking care of yourself? Are you accepting who you are? Are you forgiving yourself? Are you honoring yourself? In your actions, are you going out into relationship, into the world with strangers and best friends and lovers and bringing your loving presence there? Is that what's being incorporated into all of the things that you're doing? Because fundamentally, my belief beyond anything else, that's the meaning of life. So do you have that third voice? Are you inviting it in? Because really that's what it is. That's the core of the inspiration of the energy that surrounds us, is unconditional love. So is it present? Are you actualized doing? Are you authentically honoring yourself? And are you incorporating higher power when you do that? And to varying degrees each day, whether at the beginning of the day or the end, you may draw your own Venn diagram and say, and then you love yourself and go to sleep, and tomorrow maybe they're perfectly aligned or whatever. Yeah. But that's what it's meant to be. This isn't a cure. This is a process. And what I find is that people delight in it because they realize that at the end, no matter what their maybe diagram looks like, the answer is still that there's love involved. And people are like, man, my life started to turn when I put that energy into what I was doing.
That's cool. And I want to kind of go back to the creative process for a second, because you created this program and you also write novels, you write plays. And when it comes to personal growth and a lot of what you hear out in the world in the personal growth spaces, when it comes to being a writer, they say, write what you know. And they say also write the book that you most need to read. And you took that to another level of complexity when you created a whole program. It's not just a book, you fill out some blanks in a workbook and you call it good. It's got, like you said, a lot of depth. It's got a lot of hours of exploration. So I want to talk about how going through creating that helped you, because you had to take your own course, or you had to take your own program as you created it, essentially. So what did that do for you?
Well, there's another little secret that I hope someday isn't a secret, which is that simultaneously I also wrote a memoir. It's a whole different type of writing. It was the hardest writing I've ever done. And when I started, I kind of claimed I didn't know why I was doing it, but I was very compelled, like it just booming in my voice. We talk about inspiration. It's like, you need to do this. And I realize now that it was twofold. And one is very much exactly what you're saying, which is, for all of the character development, quote unquote, that I've done in my life, have I ever written 90,000 words about how I got to where I am? So it was the ultimate creative, factually based, but really creative endeavor on defining who I am. And I have friends who are involved in 12-step programs. I have members of my family who've read that and said, equates to one of the steps, which is an unflinching self-inventory. And I realized that that's very much what I needed to do, because there were things that I had set aside, because there were truths that I didn't think mattered, because I didn't call out the wrongs that had been done to me, and because I didn't define how different relationships, including with my children, had affected me. So that was a massive exercise. And I hope it's published someday because I think, one, it's very relatable. I think it's pretty entertaining. And because the other thing that I realized it did was it created the answer to how I know what I know, which is, yeah, I wrote this program. And it's based on my whole life and everything we've talked about in the last hour.
Yeah.
And I have a fine arts degree from film school. I'm not ordained. I don't have advanced degrees. I have written books, but they've all been from within. I've studied with masters, but they didn't give me a certificate. I've done all the work, but you didn't see that. You didn't see me meditating for hours. If you're looking for an easy reason to trust me, and it comes to you from letters after a name or some even long career or history, I have a resume with an 18-year gap in the middle because I was just at home with my kids. So writing the memoir also helped me remember why I know what I know. So when I was developing the program and when I was incorporating and remembering these voices, sometimes through rather painful experiences, as I explained, as I started to feel the power of them, I too was skeptical from time to time. I too was wondering, well, where does this come from? How do you know this? I've had serious shadow side thoughts about, well, no one's going to believe you, or why should they? And the fact that I incorporate this into my life, the fact that I just wrote an entire memoir about how I got to where I am, the fact that I have kind of had to test it out and still am. 2 months ago, I took one of the most enormous personal leap I've ever taken in my entire life. And in the sum, it's I moved from a very safe and affordable life in Indianapolis, Indiana, and plopped myself down in Chelsea, Manhattan, New York City, only because I've always wanted to live here again. This is where I went to school and went to college. And I don't have a full-fledged plan. I have resources. I know how to do it. I'm a pretty smart guy. And every day I have to incorporate the inspiration that says it's going to be okay, the motivation, like what I was saying this morning, you better get your act together, and the feelings of I'm delighted, like the joy of being here and following through and taking the risk. So yeah, this is something once you become aware of it, and once I became aware of it, I was like, oh, it's not about stepping perfectly or into a perfect life. It's about stepping confidently into anything, scary, real, frightening, important, not silly. And I have the tools to know this is going to be okay. And maybe better than okay. I have the tools to assess whether or not I have just made the heavens sing with what I just did. And that's what I want to do each day, is not get to the end and wonder, well, okay, and so I want to be in the midst of it thinking, yeah, or whatever it is.
The whole range. That's
For
important.
sure.
That's important. That's awesome. Well, David, is there anything that we haven't talked about, haven't covered here that you think is really important for people to hear?
I think that what I would really just remind people is that however daunting my entire program looks, or 90,000 words sounds, or whatever simple truths you have pulled away from listening to us talk today, those are the ones that matter the most. That love is what it's really about, that within you is the power to make a difference, that you have everything that you need in order to succeed, that judgment isn't required, that you are worthy. Find the simple mantras. I'm too chicken to get a tattoo, but I literally get temporary tattoos from a company online, and I'll put reminders there. Some people tie a little red string. I have artwork. Find the simple thing that helps you remember that you are worthy, you are worth it, and that the world needs you. And then just build from there, one step at a time. And then we'll do that together if you want. Reach out to James, reach out to me. We'd love to talk to you and just engage. That's what we do.
That was powerful. Thank you for that. And it's davidallenbrown.com if anyone wants to go and see the work that you do.
Yes, please. Sometimes people stumble over Allen. They want to spell it with 2 L's or with an E. So it's David Allen, ALAN, Brown.com. And yeah, you can reach me all sorts of ways through there.
Good deal. Well, David Allen Brown, thank you so much for being here on A Joyful Rebellion today. This was a great conversation.
And it rejuvenates me every time to touch base and to be interacting with great people and to serve your audience. So thank you.
Thanks for joining me today. If something in this episode stirred something in you, don't keep it to yourself. Screenshot it and tag me, or DM me on the socials, send smoke signals, whatever works. I want to know what you're plotting. This show isn't just about listening. It's about building something real together. So I hope to hear from you soon, and I'll be right here next week when you're ready to keep the rebellion going.